The studio lights were blinding, the audience unusually tense. It wasn't the typical episode of Judge Judy. Today was different, a live primetime broadcast meant to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the iconic courtroom show. The producers wanted something special. Controversial. Unforgettable. Enter Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, firebrand attorney, no stranger to confrontation, and known for her unfiltered truths. She'd been invited to speak during a live panel on accountability in power, law, politics, and the courts. At first glance, it seemed like an odd pairing, the sharp-tongued judge versus a rising political star. But the network knew exactly what they were doing. 5 minutes into the discussion, sparks were already flying. The topic? Qualified immunity and the double standards in the justice system. Jasmine calmly laid out her argument with surgical precision. We cannot have a system where officers are shielded from consequences, but citizens are crushed for the smallest infractions, she said, her voice calm but cutting. Judge Judy narrowed her eyes. You're oversimplifying, she snapped. You young politicians always think passion makes you right. But in my courtroom, facts and law matter more than social media clout. The crowd gasped. Jasmine slowly turned to the judge, her expression unreadable. The air turned heavy. Cameras zoomed in. Millions were watching. And Jasmine Crockett was just getting started. The silence lingered for a beat too long. Jasmine didn't blink. She leaned forward, her hands folded, voice low and deliberate. With respect, Judge, she began, her tone like ice over fire, I practiced law before I ever tweeted a word. I've argued cases in real courtrooms, not reality TV sets dressed up like them. The audience murmured. Even the cameraman flinched. Judge Judy's lips thinned. Excuse me. She barked, clearly not used to being challenged, especially not on her turf. But Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She simply continued, you invited me here to talk about justice. But it sounds like what you really want is obedience. Judy's finger rose, mid-rebuttal, but Jasmine cut her off before a word left her mouth. I didn't come here to be lectured about how I should sound or behave to be taken seriously. If you want to talk about facts and law, Jasmine said, sliding a printed document from her binder, we can start with Graham versus Connor, the very foundation of qualified immunity. Let's see who's oversimplifying. The camera zoomed in on the case title. Twitter exploded. Hashtag Graham vs. Judy was trending within seconds. Judge Judy sat back, momentarily speechless. Her producers could be seen offstage gesturing wildly, part panic, part awe. But Jasmine wasn't done yet. I didn't ask to be here. You invited me. So let's have the conversation. All of it. The temperature in the studio dropped. And just like that, the courtroom wasn't Judy's anymore. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, arms folded, eyes narrowed like a cornered general reassessing the battlefield. For the first time in her career, she wasn't in control, not of the room, not of the narrative, and certainly not of Jasmine Crockett. The studio audience was locked in, eyes bouncing between the two women like a tennis match on the brink of explosion. Well, Judy finally said, her voice quieter but no less pointed, it seems you came prepared for a debate, not a discussion. Jasmine raised a brow. No, Judge. I came prepared for a confrontation you started the moment you dismissed my experience. A few audience members clapped, a hesitant, spontaneous ripple of support. You think you're doing something noble, Judy said, straightening up, but what you're actually doing is dividing people with theatrics and, Jasmine cut in, not with volume, but with clarity. Dividing people. Judge, I represent constituents who live the consequences of decisions made in courtrooms like yours. I've watched mothers bury sons because an officer feared for their life. That's not theatrics, that's real life. And if I sound passionate, it's because I don't have the luxury of being detached. The words hit like bricks. Even Judge Judy looked momentarily rattled. Behind the scenes, the network's social media team scrambled. Clips were already being clipped. Hashtags like hashtag Crockett clapback and hashtag Judge Judy live were trending across multiple platforms. One producer whispered into his headset, "We just went viral." But Jasmine wasn't thinking about optics. She turned to face the camera directly. "Justice isn't about ego or legacy," she said. "It's about truth, and the courage to face it, even when it's uncomfortable." And that's when the internet truly began to melt down. Judge Judy adjusted her robe, visibly unsettled now. She was known for verbal dominance, not being outmaneuvered by a sitting member of Congress. Still, she tried to regain footing. "I've sat on the bench longer than you've been in public service," she said sharply. "I've seen more cases, more lies, more manipulation than you can imagine." Jasmine didn't flinch. "And yet," she said evenly, "with all that experience, you still confuse volume with value." The audience gasped. A few laughed, not mockingly, but in shock at the sheer weight of that reply. Judy opened her mouth, but Jasmine pressed forward. "This isn't about how long you've served. It's about how well. And if you think justice is about intimidation, not accountability, then maybe you've spent too long in the chair." Now the entire studio was silent. Judge Judy stared at her, stunned. Her gavel sat untouched. Her signature comebacks never came. And then Jasmine delivered the final blow, without anger, without a raised voice, just cool certainty. "You don't have to like me. But you'll never silence me." That was it. The crowd erupted. Not the usual polite clapping. This was thunderous. Raw. The network cut to commercial, too late. The moment was already clipped, shared, and flooding every platform imaginable. By the time the show returned from break, Judge Judy's name was trending second, right after Jasmine Crockett's. Back from commercial, the camera cut to Judge Judy. Her posture had changed, a little more rigid, a little less commanding. She smiled, but it was tight, measured. "We invited Congresswoman Crockett here to have a dialogue," she said, her voice calmer but with an edge of forced control. Clearly, she came with something more in mind. Jasmine sat silently, composed, unmoved. Then she leaned toward her microphone, her voice almost a whisper, yet somehow louder than anything else in the room. "I came with truth. If that feels like an attack, maybe it's time to ask why." A silence fell again. Deep. Uncomfortable. In the control booth, producers whispered, "We've never seen Judy rattled like this." Backstage, Judy's legal consultant leaned over to one of the junior staff and said quietly, "That woman just made history." When the panel ended, Judy offered a stiff nod and walked off set first, no post-show banter, no signature quip. Meanwhile, Jasmine stood, shook hands with the other panelists, and calmly exited to a standing ovation from half the studio audience. Online, the response was nuclear. Clips of Jasmine's clapbacks hit 1 million views before the episode had even finished airing. Commentators across the political spectrum were chiming in. Even late-night hosts teased teasers for their own monologues about the day Crockett froze Judge Judy. But Jasmine? She was already on her way to the airport. No tweet. No interview. No gloating. Just one reposted clip from a viewer, the moment she said, "You'll never silence me." She captioned it with a single snowflake emoji. Snowflake and the internet lost its mind. By sunrise the next morning, the headlines were everywhere: Jasmine Crockett freezes Judge Judy live on air, a new political star rises, TV titan silenced. Judy's worst broadcast ever, Crockett's cool precision shakes America, cable network scrambled for follow-up coverage. The clip had already hit 32 million views in under 12 hours. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, things had shifted. Reporters mobbed Jasmine's team as she arrived for a scheduled committee hearing. Microphones flew in from every direction. "Congresswoman, any comment on what happened last night? Do you feel you embarrassed a national icon?" Was that confrontation planned? Jasmine paused at the top of the Capitol steps, turned calmly, and smiled slightly. I didn't go there to embarrass anyone, she said. I went to defend what I believe in. That's what public service is supposed to be. She left it at that. Back in Judge Judy's camp, things were less composed. Anonymous insiders leaked that the judge was furious with the producers, claiming she was set up and ambushed. One crew member told TV Line she thought she'd put a rookie in her place. But Crockett came with armor. Judy's team issued a formal statement trying to downplay the moment. The segment was spirited, and Judge Judy respects differing viewpoints, even when passionate. But it was too late. The internet had crowned Jasmine Crockett not just as a congresswoman, but as a force of nature. Memes flooded in. One had Judy mid-sentence with the caption, "I object." Underneath, "Objection overruled," by Crockett. Inside the network headquarters, panic was morphing into profit. The executive producer of Judge Judy Live was summoned for an emergency meeting. Ratings were at record highs, but the backlash from Judy's longtime loyalists was loud. This was supposed to be a celebration, one senior VP barked. Instead, you let Crockett hijack the stage. But another exec leaned forward with a smirk. Hijack? Please. She saved it. We just got the most watched segment in daytime TV history. Don't spin gold into scandal. Meanwhile, in Jasmine Crockett's office, her team was fielding non-stop requests, interviews, op-eds, offers from morning shows to primetime anchors. But Jasmine wasn't interested in becoming a media darling. She waved them all off. I'm not trying to be a celebrity, she said. I want people to pay attention to the message, not the moment. Her chief of staff nodded. Still, that was one hell of a moment. Backstage footage from the episode leaked, including a clip of a producer whispering frantically to Judge Judy during the break, "You're losing control. We need to pivot, now." That clip only made things worse for Judy's image. The public saw it not just as a loss, but a collapse. Still, Judge Judy wasn't done. Not by a long shot. In an unannounced interview taped the next evening, she sat across from a friendly network host and said coldly, "I've handled mob bosses, liars, and manipulators. That young lady? She's not the first to talk slick. And she won't be the last." The clip aired that night, and the internet's reaction was swift. One user wrote, "When you lose, but pretend it's a strategy." Another, "Judy blinked. Crockett didn't." As Judge Judy's carefully worded interview made the rounds, something unexpected happened. The public didn't rally behind her. In fact, many of her longtime viewers, particularly younger women and professionals of color, began questioning her legacy. One viral thread read, "I used to love Judy. But watching how she treated Representative Crockett with instant disrespect, and then crumbled when Crockett responded with facts, it exposed something deeper." Others chimed in with similar sentiments. This wasn't sass versus sass. This was generational power being challenged, and failing the test. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett kept quiet. No tweets. No interviews. No viral TikToks. Her silence became its own message, reinforcing that she wasn't chasing the moment. She was the moment. Cable pundits split sharply. Conservative commentators labeled Jasmine disrespectful, performative, and arrogant. But even some of them admitted, off camera, that she had come prepared, calm, and unshakable. On MSNBC and CNN, analysts dissected her quotes like poetry. They replayed her now iconic line, "If you think justice is about intimidation, not accountability, then maybe you've spent too long in the chair." That clip alone hit 50 million views across platforms. Colleges invited her to speak. Law schools requested guest lectures. A major publisher even reached out with a 7-figure book deal offer titled Unshaken. Back in New York, Judge Judy's production team was fighting fires on all fronts. A petition to cancel the anniversary series was gaining steam. And then, a leaked memo hit the press. Internal notes showing that Judy had requested the topic list be changed at the last minute to something that would put Crockett off balance. The headline? Scripted showdown backfires, Judge Judy tried to set a trap, but walked into one instead. The leaked memo was the final spark. By midday, major outlets ran wall-to-wall coverage under a single banner, #JudyGate. The revelation that the producers, and possibly Judy herself, attempted to steer the episode into a deliberate ambush destroyed the credibility of the special. Sponsors pulled ads. The network's legal team went into overdrive. A prominent anchor declared live, it wasn't a courtroom, it was a setup. And Crockett dismantled it with receipts. Judge Judy released a second statement, this one laced with veiled bitterness, I've built a career on exposing deception and arrogance. Unfortunately, sometimes the deceivers wear suits and smile for cameras. But no one was buying it anymore. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett was back in session on Capitol Hill, unfazed. When reporters asked if she had seen the leaked memo, she smiled calmly, I came armed with truth. If that rattled the room, maybe the room needed to be rattled. When asked about Judge Judy's latest remarks, she simply responded, I'm not interested in throwing punches where wisdom already landed a blow. That quote alone flooded news feeds. It was clipped, remixed, and even printed on t-shirts by the end of the week. Public support exploded. Polling showed a massive spike in her national name recognition. Approval ratings among independents, moderates, and young voters surged. Even staunch critics admitted, she had poise, power, and presence. Within days, political insiders whispered what the headlines hadn't said yet, Jasmine Crockett just became a 2028 name. And Judge Judy? She quietly cancelled the rest of her special live series. No official goodbye. No press tour. Just a tweet, short and sharp, I don't lose sleep over temporary noise. I've ruled enough to know when a storm passes. But the internet replied instantly, the storm didn't pass. It replaced the forecast. 1 week later, the storm hadn't passed, it had redefined the landscape. On Capitol Hill, Jasmine Crockett walked through the rotunda with the calm of someone who had just survived a televised ambush and came out 10 stories taller. Colleagues who once saw her as too bold now leaned in when she spoke. In private meetings, senior members of her party began floating ideas, committee leadership, joint legislation, maybe even a keynote speech at the next national convention. She's not just a headline anymore, one strategist whispered. She's a blueprint. Meanwhile, media analysts began referring to the Judy Crockett clash as a generational inflection point, not just TV drama, but a public reckoning about power, tone, and what authority looks like in a changing America. Even university debate teams began using the exchange as a case study, when calm truth meets institutional ego, who wins? Jasmine's team quietly trademarked the phrase, "You'll never silence me." It was already appearing on murals, posters, and grassroots campaign shirts. Judge Judy. She retreated from the spotlight. Despite her long-standing image as an unshakable force, her legacy had taken a hit. Some fans still defended her, but many admitted, for the first time, they saw her lose her grip. She cancelled her speaking tour. Interviews were declined. Her silence, once seen as strength, now read like retreat. Back in Texas, Jasmine Crockett gave a small-town interview to a local news outlet, the first since the confrontation. When asked how it felt to shut down a legend, she smiled softly. I wasn't trying to shut anyone down, she said. I was trying to speak up, and I guess America was ready to hear it. The final shot. A single frame of Jasmine walking away from the Capitol steps, snowflake emoji quietly stitched into the sleeve of her blazer. No words. No caption. Just history being made. Weeks passed, but the impact didn't fade, it expanded. On college campuses, student unions hosted panels titled, Crockett vs. Judy, Power, Gender, and Generational Voice. Professors who once taught Roe versus Wade and Brown versus Board now added the Crockett moment to their curriculum under modern political discourse. Even Hollywood took notice. Rumors swirled that a major streaming platform was developing a limited series on rising political voices, with Jasmine Crockett at the center. One A-list actress publicly stated, "If anyone gets to play Crockett, they better come ready." That woman redefined presence. Meanwhile, Judge Judy's empire was in quiet retreat. Ratings for her spin-off content dipped. Her publisher delayed a forthcoming memoir, waiting for the heat to die down. One industry insider noted, "She's still a giant, but Crockett cracked the pedestal." Inside political circles, things moved fast. Jasmine began getting invites not just to TV roundtables, but to closed-door meetings with high-ranking Democrats. Fundraising surged. Her district's support became national. One powerful senator told a donor quietly, "You saw what she did on TV? Imagine what she'll do in the Senate." But Jasmine wasn't gloating. In fact, she remained largely out of the spotlight, declining major interviews and focusing instead on her policy work. When pressed by her team to ride the wave, she replied with just 5 words, "Waves crash. I build legacy." And she meant it. The Daytime magazine released a cover with her image, eyes steady, arms crossed, the headline, "The woman who wouldn't blink." America collectively knew, this wasn't about one night. This was a shift. Months later, the clip of Jasmine Crockett standing unshaken before Judge Judy was still circulating, now less as a viral moment and more as a cultural landmark. It had become shorthand for something bigger. A woman refusing to fold, not with fire, but with focus. Late one evening, Jasmine sat alone in her office, stacks of bills and committee memos in front of her. She wasn't thinking about television. She wasn't thinking about trending hashtags or magazine covers. She was thinking about policy. About people. About purpose. Her phone buzzed, another request to appear on a major talk show. She sighed, smiled faintly, and turned the screen face down. Moments later, her communications director poked in and said, "There's another journalist asking for comment. They want to know if you still stand by what you said that night on Judge Judy Live." Jasmine looked up, calm and composed. "Tell them," she said, "I stand by it more now than ever." Then she returned to her work, quietly, diligently, relentlessly. Across the country, her words were now being quoted in graduation speeches, protest signs, and campaign rallies. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't chasing the echo. She was still writing the source. And far from the spotlight, in a dim room with just a desk lamp and her convictions, Jasmine whispered to herself, "Let them talk. I'll move."